call the September 29, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting to an order, and would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, welcome to everyone who is attending in person tonight, and to those online, thank you for attending the September 29th Committee of the Whole meeting. At this time, we would like to start with roll call. Mr. Mauser, please.
Okay, Rosenberg.
Present.
Mylar.
Here.
Lotz.
Here.
Stoffel.
Here.
Carney.
Here.
Foley.
Here.
Roach.
Here.
Newcomb. Hudson.
Here.
Blackburn.
Here.
Morse.
Here.
Campbell. Here. Parchman.
Here. Here.
Thank you. Okay, our last Committee of the Whole meeting was March 31st, 2025. The minutes are included in the packet. Everybody should have time to take a look at those. So do we have any questions on the minutes from March 31st, 2025? Can I get a motion?
Motion. Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Again, no questions, comments? Okay, roll call, please. Or actually, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, thank you. At this time, we will move into our first session of public comments. This portion of the council of the whole meeting is reserved for any member of the public wishing to address the council. The Illinois Open Meetings Act 5 ILCS 120/1 mandates no action shall be taken on matters not listed on the agenda, but council may direct staff or to address the topic or refer the matter to a committee. Please provide the city clerk with your name, speak into the microphone, limit your presentation to 5 minutes, and avoid repetitious comments. Thank you. Does anyone want to come forward for the first session of public comments? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. We're going to start with our items number 3.1 on the agenda. I will turn that over to our interim city administrator, Grant Litteken.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So attached is 3.1, items for discussion, is the strategic plan dated for fiscal years 27 through 29. And so that will be this next upcoming year starting May 1, which coincides with the city's fiscal year. This strategic plan has been shared with the council at previous committee meetings, and staff has reviewed it and updated it with the council's feedback. At this point, there is a draft strategic plan update attached to the board docs agenda, and I will be open to questions from the council or to the public at this time. If the council feels like this strategic document is ready to move forward and be supported by the council, then it will appear on the next city council agenda for that resolution. So at this time, we'll take any questions from the council or the committee or public.
I have something.
Absolutely.
Regarding goal number 4, promote economic development, something that's been talked about historically, but I didn't think to mention it earlier, but I was reviewing it this weekend, is if we should add an economic development committee that maybe meets quarterly, or be more intentional about using a committee of the whole, or community development sort of maybe, but I kind of want to keep it separate for economic development updates. And I think Jessica 10 years ago would have seen economic development and community development updates as the same, but I've learned that they're very different. So when we do community development updates in our committee, it's about projects that have been approved. It's very technical and administrative. I see economic development recaps being more theoretical, and they touch a lot of different departments. So a lot of it has to do with Parks and Rec, a lot of it has to do with administrative stuff, tourism. So just being more intentional throughout the year about tying the funding that we receive from all the different revenue sources into that economic engine that we've developed. I don't feel like we've got a landing space right now to do that, and I think we've grown to the size where that's important to do a couple times a year. So just something to consider, just being more intentional, either as a standalone committee, although I don't see us voting on anything, or just finding space to educate us more frequently on economic development updates.
Thank you for
I
that.
support that.
Okay, so I appreciate the thoughts and comments, and we will discuss that and get back to you. The committee structure's kind of been stale or stagnant for a long time on the committees that exist. I don't necessarily know standing up another committee, and like you said, probably won't vote on a whole lot of things, but certainly more education, more consistent is something we could very easily implement.
So just as an example, we know that we have a lot of sports tourism, but, you know, the marching band held a competition and 10,000 people were in O'Fallon on like September 18th. There are businesses that if they knew that there were people coming into town, may have staffed differently, behaved differently, promoted differently. So just providing education about what's happening in addition to sports tourism, but also making sure the right people are kind of involved in that discussion, just as an example.
Well, and just because I'm thinking about it, during our conference, I met a gentleman, his group's coming down, and he wants to reach out to somebody that, you know, and again, if the businesses know they're coming, it's a fraternity coming to the one hotel for an event for the weekend. So it's a pretty sizable group, so again, they'd be a little bit better prepared.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on the strategic plan? Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, this will go forward. We'll make those updates and discuss it with our leadership team and get back with the city council. But since that's more of a minor change on the grand scheme of the entire strategic plan, we'll prepare it for a future resolution formally adopting the strategic plan.
And for those watching online, there's been several meetings over the past months to develop the strategic plan with a lot of input from our leadership team, multiple opportunities for input from the city council. So while there's not a lot of discussion on this strategic plan document, it has been discussed and vetted and changed based on council and our leadership team inputs. So thank you, Grant.
Okay, we'll move on to 3.2, the capital improvement plan presentation. So this was also included in the agenda, and it provides a link that goes to the portal in which we archive the CIP. As a history lesson, we have done this now for 5 or 6 years. This is more or less the unofficial start of our budget season, and so the leadership team and departments put this together on a 5-year basis that rotates each year. So when 1 year is completed, the previous year rolls off. We document it, archive it, and then we add the 5th year. The structure of the CIP is large projects, engineering involved in it, equipment, and vehicles. And so we use this and we go into our budget meetings with year 1 and 2, we're pretty locked in on those are what we know we need and what we have money for. And as you get a little bit further out into years 3, 4, and 5 are a little bit more what we call stretch projects, things we have to prepare further for. When we separate this by each fund, we categorize them into administration, community development, EMS, fire, information, library, parks and recreation, police, and public works. Most of the larger capital projects are in public works and parks and recreation traditionally. You will see a large number under the library on this current CIP. And unfortunately, Jeff Taylor is not able to be here tonight, but I have a few of his projects to discuss. And if there's greater questions about specific public works projects, he's open to questions and we'll get feedback to you later on. And so, any questions about the structure of the CIP before we move on to the individual projects?
Can you explain, so the library is a component piece of the city
That is true.
in that they have their own governing board, they levy their own taxes. They are considered a department of the city for operational purposes. So when we look at $15 million in 27 and 15 and 28, I realize that the CIP usually doesn't have funding sources identified, but is that pure library taxes or truly unspecified?
So that would be a future question for the library as they
Okay.
move forward through their engagement sessions for a potential new library in the future.
Okay.
I know at the end of October, they have some public outreach and some committee meetings with stakeholders to discuss that. But as mentioned, yes, the library operates and functions like another city department, just like the rest of them. We work together on human resources, information technology, finance. But the difference with them is they have their own governing board. So the hiring and firing decisions, the structural decisions are handled by that board and not necessarily by this city council or city staff. Saying that was a good segue of, if you look into the individual projects listed in the CIP, many of them have funding sources identified. Some do not. As we move forward in those projects, as I mentioned, those stretch projects that are 3-4 years out, the funding source will be unidentified until a point in time when we have a better knowledge of the costs and what revenue sources are coming in. Any other questions about the CIP? Okay, so each department head that's here today, while we'll open up to their department, there's a lot of them that are more routine, like public safety vehicles and fire vehicles, although the cost of fire vehicles continues to go up. But then there's some departments that have very specific projects, like Andrew, who will take a little bit more time. I will introduce the administration departments. CIP projects, which are at this point are mostly repeat projects that include facility and securities and camera systems. The LPRs around town. We're looking at some additional cameras in downtown area for the larger events we're hosting. The wayfinding and signage program includes gateway signage around town. The large items include some engineering and some design studies for the downtown streetscape improvements in the future. One other thing that we often bring up is columbarium in O'Fallon City Cemetery. So it's the next fiscal year. Misty McDonald will report to the council on the utilization of those niches for the columbarium. And our plan is to, as those continue to be used, install more, and to a point where we can install a covering over top of them, which you see is that larger amount, roughly $60,000. With that, is there any questions about the items listed under administration? Okay. So moving on, similar to Jeff Taylor, Greg Anderson's unavailable to be here tonight, but many of his capital improvement projects are just vehicles. He rotates his vehicles on a routine basis when they age out due to maintenance or time or mileage. And so he has a code enforcement property maintenance vehicle for next fiscal year, as building inspector the following, and another building inspector the following year. So any questions about those? Okay, now we get into EMS, and Chief Sherman is here today to answer any questions. But at this point, he has an EMS chief vehicle for the next fiscal year and a replacement ambulance in 3 years from now. Okay. Moving on, for Chief White's fire apparatuses, he does have a apparatus replacement schedule, but as you see, we always say paint it red and it becomes expensive. He has the heavy rescue apparatus replaced next year, and then fire engine replacements in the next 2 fiscal years. Any questions or any information you'd like to provide, Brad?
I was just gonna say, so the heavy rescue, that money is, we're gonna, the heavy rescue. So the heavy rescue, we're budgeting for that. It'll probably take 2+ years to get it though. So that money will be resolutions made to eventually move that money down the food chain when that truck comes in. The rest of those apparatus, the engines and ladders and stuff like that, those are kind of placeholders because to be honest, like I say, the cost of those things has gone off the charts. We're really taking a hard look at the vehicles we have currently to see if we can just sustain what we have a few years longer for each of those. Most of our trucks are very well maintained with Craig working on them daily. They're pretty low mileage, pretty low hours on the engines. So my goal is to maybe push each of those trucks 4 or 5 years down the road. So the numbers you see there are kind of placeholders, but we may start sliding those to the right just because does it make sense to buy $1 million truck when my truck's not really that old or that worn out at this point? So on a positive note, we did see the manufacturers get called to Capitol Hill and get grilled on their multi-billion-dollar profits over the last few years, while the costs have gone up, just astronomically. So we're hoping that Congress will actually start helping us out on the back end there and make them accountable for the cost increases as well.
Thank you, Chief.
Hey, Chief, if we paint them green, are they cheaper?
No, we don't mind that either.
No, we won't paint them white either.
Am I remembering correctly, when we've kind of discussed with some of the new development at Park Place, needing a different kind of ladder truck? And like what's going to sort of be a trigger for that, and what would be the timeline for something like that to come in? Or am I misremembering?
No, you're correct. So with that new development going out there, realistically, we'll need a third ladder truck. And it's not so much that we need the third truck, it's just our 75-foot truck's not going to be operationally capable out there. So another ladder truck would cost, as it stands now, about $2.5 million. It'll take somewhere between 3 and 4 years to build. So some of that is going to be based on timing of when development really starts and how far out that projection is before it's really operational. But yeah, we'll have to kind of time it and see where the costs are in that process as well.
So you're saying, just making sure I understand correctly. So we have 75-foot ladder trucks now, and based on the height of the hotel that's proposed out there, we need like a 100-footer or something like that?
Correct. So we have a 75-foot truck that sits in Station 1. We have a 100-foot ladder truck with that rescue platform on it at Station 4, closest to Veneta there. But we would really need another 100-foot truck or a 125-foot truck. That also comes into play too with the big box stores we have, Walmarts, Menards, being able to, if a fire starts in the center of that building, being able to project up high enough to get over the top of that thing. So it'll be a multi-use thing, but predominantly used for the new development and then even into Shiloh around the Target Plaza area. We don't really have any trucks in Shiloh at this point at all. So that would be kind of moving around of some vehicles, but we'd be able to then cover the entire district from each of those stations.
And for fire apparatus, as the city continues to grow, we have to pivot and adapt. So if Reeder Road gets developed with a bunch of warehouses, typically those are all sprinkled and they'll put themselves out. But residential structures, as we continue to grow, especially in the north part of town, that's something we look at long-term on potential future firehouses or what type of apparatuses we use. Any other questions for the fire side? Okay. Moving on to information technology, IT Director Dan Gentry is here. Out of all the department heads, he is the one who puts it down to the exact dollar amount. And so I'm not going to try to explain what his CIP is here. Dan, you're welcome to explain or discuss the big items you have in here.
Test. Can you hear me? So most of what IT submits is a little bit different than what other departments submit. So as an example, in what is programmed for next fiscal year, there's actually only 2 physical items that would meet a standard capital project definition by any other department or city. Most of what we do, we've consolidated the types of things that we take care of and replace into categories, and we present it to you guys in a way so that you can see that we are systematically replacing those over different time cycles. So whether it's a desktop computer or a server or those types of things, those are budgeted in cycles, and we kind of break it out this way to make it easier to discuss. That in part was a reaction to back in 2012 when I started in this position. Department heads wanted to go over every single item that was going to be replaced in their next year's budget, and that just didn't last very long. The 2 items for next year, one of them is actually part of our servers and data center money, which is what you guys would know as a battery backup. It's a UPS in the public safety data center. It's about a $45,000 item, which isn't bad since that's about what it cost to put in, but we had a lot of other expenses, putting that in 10 years ago. The other is a vehicle replacement, and our vehicles, by the time they get replaced, the ones that we have in stock now will be between 15 and 20 years old. In fact, the oldest vehicle is the one that we plan to keep the longest because it's the best. So just kind of throwing that out there. Really, the only other item of note that I would give is that we do have an item in not this next fiscal year, but the year after. It's kind of an environmental control project, if you will, for the IT building. We have doors with no atrium, no breezeway, whatever you want to put it. So our people are really cold in the winter and they're really hot in the summer because people come in and out. In addition to trying to resolve that issue, I'm hoping that we can beautify the front of the building to be a little bit better neighbors and do some sort of architectural treatment on the front of the building to kind of expand upon what we have done recently with some landscaping. We have plans to try and replace some fencing this year. We'll see how that goes because I'm not sure that we're going to even be able to get people to bid, much less do fencing right now since, as you guys are aware, driving around neighborhoods, those folks are in high demand. So I guess with that, I'll just throw it, unless you have, in case you had any questions.
Thank you, Dan. So moving on, Director Ryan Johnson's not here, but there is an amount budgeted in there, not budgeted, sorry, let me correct myself, listed in the CIP for a new library. I do want to remind this council that by adopting the CIP and listening to the projects included doesn't mean you approve any budgetary expenditures. This is simply something that the staff works with and stay on the same page as the elected officials and the public to say, here's kind of what we have coming down the road. And I should have said this at the beginning, but we use this at budget time to look 2, 3, 4 years down. And if we know there's a large project or expenditure, we begin in that fiscal year to save up and put it into capital reserves. So when it gets to 3 years from now, we're not scrounging around trying to find $1.5 million or $2 million for a ladder truck. We've saved up over 4 years to purchase it. Sandy Evans, do you have anything to add?
I don't have a working mic, but no, I mean, as Grant said, we do maintain reserves throughout the year, and as we go through the budget, that is what we look at to see what we have and how much we should be putting back. So we do have a very good process in place. So yes, as Grant said, this is not because it's on here, doesn't mean we're going to get it, so.
Thank you, Sandy.
Can I just make a comment? I want to tie it together for residents and those of us that don't always speak the same language. So when we say capital reserves, for residents, that frequently shows up as the treasurer's report within the finance and administration report. So that is a publicly available report. We put out how much money we have. I call it cash on hand because I think reserves sounds like a rainy day fund, but the point in all of that is the money sitting there is not sitting there and just collecting dust. It's money for these projects that we have planned for, but it's sometimes hard to tie that together. So when you see that there might be $80 million cash on hand, the way I interpret that is we are behaving in the way I expect government to behave, and that is to identify projects through the residents and then save for those projects. Thank you.
Sandy, on that same note, can you explain how having the cash on hand for us to finish the community pool, how that saved us about $6 million?
That is correct. So rather than bonding, we knew the project was going to be about $20 million. To bond at the amount of $20 million, as Mayor said, by using our reserves, which we had available in the general fund, by transferring approximately $8 million from the general fund and using that for the or for the park, community park project, we saved approximately $7 million in interest cost. So yes, we did bond $8 million, but it also saved us, again, $6 to $7 million just by using our reserve fund, and yet still giving us a cushion. So as we continue, we keep building up that reserve so that should other projects come about, we can continue to save money by using the money that is our cash on hand.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to Parks and Recreation. Andrew, you have a lot of projects on here.
Yes, thank you, Grant. So just kind of want to go down the list. Obviously, a lot of these are just general things that we buy every year, like trucks and those types of things. So I'm going to skip over those. We have a lot of employees, and during the summer, when the seasonals increase, our demand on truckloads go up. So we typically don't buy a new truck and get rid of a truck. We just keep the truck until the wheels fall off. We just surplus 3 trucks, and we had to take the keys away because the frame's about ready to rot out. So we treat our trucks well, and we keep them forever. So when you see us getting trucks year after year, it's because of our seasonal demand, but eventually they do wear out. Okay, starting from the top, this first one of the bigger ones, is the field house. We're currently doing the feasibility study for this field house. Many of you have sat in some focus groups. The survey to the community is online to give us more information. So I did put this in FY29. This is obviously subject to move, but it's important that we have it on here because as we apply for some grants, if a park grant comes available, we want to make sure that we have these types of big projects on the CIP list so we can say we've been planning it for years. So yes, so that's why these bigger projects that are not currently funded are on this list. So, and I did put $30 million as a placeholder. Again, based on the feasibility study, that could go up or down depending on what the results are. Sports Park North parking lot, obviously we did 2 parking lots. This one is well far in advance because there is, if those of you who remember the master plan, there is one more potential parking lot we could put on the north side. So again, based on the field house and what we do with that, we could potentially add another parking lot there as well. So that's why that's on there. The Phase 5 parking lot is the one right behind baseball fields 2 and 3. And that's just to service the baseball fields, and that's probably the next parking lot we'll do down there, and we're hoping by completing that'll relieve some of the pressure on some of the soccer as well. So we do have that in the plan for 2 more years from now. And then just general playground replacements. The majority of our playgrounds now are 20 years old. They've all, unfortunately, are going to be hit hard with some replacements over the next 3 to 5 years. They're expensive to replace, but they do last 20, 25 years. So we do constantly replace parts on them. We do constantly do maintenance on them, but just like the one at Community Park, they're going to reach a point where the replacement parts are not available, or they're just too long to get those replacement parts. So you'll see a plethora of playground replacements on here because we have reached a 20-year mark on the majority of our playgrounds. The southwest corner of the sports park, again, this is going to be, by and large, depending on what the feasibility study says and where the facility, if it's built, goes. But, we have thousands of people soon to be moving right across the street from the park with some of the new development. So we don't want to forget about that southwest corner. We don't want to forget about all those residents moving in and providing them a place to recreate in a park. So currently that is in there right now. But again, that's going to be dependent on some of the current studies we have going on. Just some pathway lighting some solar lighting for the trail. As you know, it gets dark on those trails, anybody who walks the trail at night. Skate park Phase 2, the skate park, again, this is several years out. We don't have a real demand for it, but again, we want to keep that on the list. As the community grows, we're eventually probably going to reach a point where we'll want to add a Phase 2 to the skate park. Vehicle replacements, we talked about, playground replacements. Trail renovation at Rock Springs Park. The trail at Rock Springs Park, the standard in town is a 10-foot wide trail, and that's what we're building. That's what we have throughout the majority of the town. That's what our bike plan says. The trail at Rock Spring is not that wide and gets a lot of traffic. So we want to not only resurface that trail, but make it wider as well. So that's why it's a pretty big number. But it is, to be consistent with our bike master plan, we do want to widen that trail to make it more accessible and more bike pedestrian friendly. Fallon Station improvements, this is to add air conditioners and potentially add some kind of storage onto the building. Again, a couple of years out. It's a building that's well received, but again, this might change based on the uses of the new Caven Center. Rentals may go up or down there, so we're going to kind of track this. But certainly we want to get some air conditioner in there so we can take advantage of some more daytime meetings and daytime in the summer classes, whatnot. So we do have a little bit of money in there, a couple of years to now, to redo the air conditioning there, or to add some air conditioning. Turf fields 9 and 10. I'm going to put a pin in this one because we're going to dive into this a little bit later, but so just remember that one, and we're going to come back to it in a little bit. Barron Street parking lot, we moved a lot of our in-house rec leagues out to Barron Street for our Mighty Ball and our soccer program, and it's just easier than going over to Three Springs Park because the traffic is over there and getting out is so bad. So to diffuse some of the issues over there, we've moved to Barron Street, but we'll want to put a parking lot out there and a restroom in there in the coming years, so that's why we have that in here. There was a lot of talk about restrooms in the park. There was some concerns about Tolman Park, the community garden, and also a restroom at Barron Street. So you'll see that we put those in here as well for future, to consider in the future. Mowers, of course, is just normal replacement of mowers. Barron Street restrooms, that's what I was talking about, that we're moving more programming over there, and eventually we'd like to get a restroom out there. It does, that park does serve us well. And for those of you who don't know, it's just east of the dairy by the water tower off of Barron Street, just south of Steve's Auto Body. So there's a green space there, and we do a lot of soccer and programming over there. So high school uses it, or has used it in the past for some of their programs. So it's a well-located park. It's just nice green space. So, Savannah Hills we talked about. Again, new district. If you remember from our master plan, we had 3 areas in town where we needed to address for future parks: northeast, northwest, and then the southwest. And so I did put those in here for 5-6 years down the road to get them on the plan. Tennis courts in Community Park, just normal rehab. We've resurfaced them, and now they're getting to a point where they can't be resurfaced anymore. As soon as we do it, a crack develops. So we're going to have to do a major rehab to the Community Park tennis courts. And for those of you who don't know, we do have pickleball lines out there, but you know, they are nice courts with lights on them, and so it's just one of those things that has to be refinished. Pickleball lights, we've talked about that, to all that up to new pickleball courts. PM-UP electrical upgrades, we want to move to an electrified fleet. And so to do that, we have to upgrade the service at PMF, Park Maintenance Facility. That's what that stands for. And so that's going to be a little bit of an upgrade, but it will allow us to move to an electrified fleet in the future. So we'll want to do that now. And then the Bobcat and the Toro electric mowers is just the things we've talked about. The Community Garden Education Center, Councilmember Lotz mentioned last year that she wanted a project for the Build-A-Felon Trust Fund that was for community, kind of a feel-good project. And so this is one of those things that the Garden Club supports this project. They tried to get this done themselves by the pavilion and a little place there for the schools to come and have an education center. They couldn't get the car across the finish line. So, and thinking about it and looking at the site and talking to the Garden Club, putting an education center in there for not only the Garden Club, but to host more maker-style classes and those different type of community classes that are strictly for the community. We did like that project, so I did put that in here for future consideration. Again, it would support the community garden very good. And that championship turf field replacement is, again, a placeholder. We're going to come and talk to about that in a little bit. Any questions?
Are the pickleball lights for the Hesse Park pickleball? So right now there's 0 lights?
No, 4 of the 8 courts are lit up.
Okay, but the new courts are not?
They are not lit up yet.
Okay. How does this work? Can we thumbs up if we want it done sooner? I mean, we went through this whole process of getting these nice courts. We reoriented them so they'd be more playable. And I just feel like $55,000 on a multi-million-dollar budget. 3 years is a long time to wait for something that we know people use. So I'd be in favor, however it works, of considering moving that up.
Okay.
Excuse me. I have one question. How old is that championship field turf?
Great question. We did it in 2011, so you're looking at about 14 years. So our park guys did a tremendous job of continually grooming it, continually adding turf to it, and just patching it. So kudos to our parks crew for doing such an amazing job of keeping that field going for 14 years now.
Would your budget be adjusted, I guess, or changed if something happens with St. Alamine Park? Would it play into this, or?
Yeah, we would probably add maybe in next year's CIP some items to this regarding St. Alamine Park.
Andrew, what is the Becky Henry Playground?
The Becky Henry Playground is in the Family Sports Park. It's the original playground we put in by the waterfall, and there's a pavilion there, and then there's a playground there. And so it's every bit of 19 years old now, and it gets probably the most use, obviously being at the sports park and being by the pond there, and a heavily rented pavilion. It's just, heavily used, and it's probably on our next one that probably needs to get replaced if we can't get some of the parts.
Can I jump in with the restroom suggestion since we're talking about Becky Henry Park? My kids are in high school, so we don't frequent there, but there's not a restroom close there, and if you have like small children, that's kind of a problem to have to hope that the bathrooms across the street basically are unlocked. So just food for thought to maybe consider adding actual bathrooms by that park.
Yeah, that is a great suggestion, because kind of getting across that intersection there with some of the landscaping we have is really problematic. And when the sun's shining on that certain time of day and you're trying to cross, we recognize that's a problem that we're trying to address, because it's really bad when the sun is at that level. You can't see as you're coming in.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
All right, we will move to the next department, the police department. Chief Bergerman is available here, but as you'll see, many of his capital improvement items are replacement programs or routine. I know we've spoke to you in the past about the taser replacements, but if anybody else has any other questions about the 4 specific items there, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them.
We were also thinking about replacing some of our playgrounds, if that's all right. I'd like to add those.
Okay. Any questions about police? Okay. Thank you, Chief Bergman, for your
Thank you.
Public Works, as I mentioned earlier, Jeff Taylor's unavailable to be here tonight. He loves the CIP time because he has many dedicated funding sources in Public Works for infrastructure. And so in addition to that, there are a lot of grants that we apply for the public infrastructure. So I spoke to him earlier today. Everything you see on the CIP is items that have appeared previously on a CIP in earlier years. He completes a project, it rolls off, he adds other ones. However, he did note there are 3 projects that he did add to this year's CIP that have not been viewed by this council prior. The one is 27-15, it's Highway 50 and Greenmount Road intersection improvements. So this would be a dedicated through lane at the corner of Greenmount and Highway 50. The reason why this was entered now is because we did receive a grant in the amount of $1.5 million. And so that has been awarded. We'll use 80% of that, which is eligible to pay for the infrastructure. And then we'll use the MFT funds for the remaining engineering costs and then 20% match. And so all of these projects that he does as well, you will see in committees and councils as we approve the bid sheets and the resolutions. Another one is 27-16, the Hartman Lane repair. So again, this was another grant that we applied for and we were awarded STP funds. That will cover 75% of the construction costs, and the $300,000 from motor fuel taxes will be utilized to cover the remaining amount for that.
STP.
STP, yep, federal STP funds. And then those are surface transportation program funds. And then our motor fuel tax, which we call MFT, is used for the remaining match. And lastly, 27-17, the Bethel lift station replacement. This lift station has reached its capacity due to development in the area and is in need of replacement. The project will replace the existing lift station with a larger one that will provide additional capacity and larger pumps to accommodate the increase in sewer demand of the area, and sewer funds will be used to cover the $1.1 million in engineering and construction costs. So with that being said, are there any questions that I'm able to answer? Again, Jeff will follow up in a future committee meeting on more specifics on all these.
I have a question. Is the $2 million each year for the pavement management program, is that what we've historically been allotting, or have we upped it in the CIP, recognizing that we used to be able to do a lot more with the money we set aside, but I don't think we've ever upped it since we started the program, so we're doing less projects because things just cost more, so
So we have upped it in
Okay.
both the CIP
This is
and
new
in the
money.
budget.
this is a new budget number compared to what we've done?
Correct.
Okay.
So we originally started the program, I believe it was 1.5 million.
Okay. It went to 1.7.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So the goal of the program is, as you guys have seen in the past, and those who haven't, an engineering firm goes out and grades all of our streets. We post those on our website, and we try to keep all streets at a threshold, knowing that once streets get to a certain level of failure, they're very expensive or impossible to bring back up. And so we try to keep all of our roads to a certain amount, and then those roads that are the furthest down, those are the ones you see on the complete rebuilds, repavements. And so this $2 million, which I imagine as the economy continues to grow, will only get more expensive. But that allows us to overlay and repave roads on a schedule. Like I said, that's on our website on those road scores, and then we always put out each year kind of the roads we are quote-unquote untacking for that calendar fiscal year.
And Grant, this is just the road, the paved roads. This is not like the concrete, because don't we have a concrete management program, or are those figures in this pavement management? I can't remember.
Yes and no. So what we have found over the last few years also is a lot of the concrete roads either are very hard to keep up with. So Jeff has done a little bit different where maybe an existing concrete road, we will overpave it with asphalt, traditional asphalt.
Okay.
We also have a concrete replacement program that replaces things like storm sewer inlets, sidewalks, and all that
Okay.
other infrastructure.
Jack, didn't we have a study on, a company came in and gave us a study on roads that were problematic a few years ago?
As far as road condition?
Road condition. yeah.
Correct, and that's what I spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
And they come out and they update that.
Okay.
They look at the roads, we receive new scores. Again, those are, we're very transparent with that. So you can look at this list and look at your own road where you live at and be like, oh, and they do provide pictures. And we also try to use that to identify the roads many years down what we're doing. Now, one thing Jeff does when we do these larger projects, I think you'll talk about Hickory Street and North Cherry, and we just spoke last week about the South Cherry area. Since we're getting out there and we're tearing up the roads and replacing water lines and ditches and stuff, we'll also do a repavement at that time.
Jeff Taylor owes you dinner, because I'm going to do another question there for the record.
He's watching, so say it loud.
Oh, sorry, Jeff. I'll give you $5. Is there any plan to connect the freshman campus to Old Collinsville as far as sidewalks go? And I know that's tricky because you're going through about both the city and the county venues, but.
Correct, and there's a lot of private land up there. We did have a meeting with Metro East Parks and Recreation District probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we identified that as a potential for the Safe Routes to School grant program. It's just at this point, they award that once a year, and so we're looking into some other ones. But yes, the answer is yes, we're looking at sidewalks for that.
I was just begging the question, so.
Yeah. Okay, and Ross?
One more. I just see the Pierce Boulevard traffic coming, and just to Jeff, if next committee meeting or next time, if we can talk about where we're at with that and any updates or what's the plan?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one thing I will touch upon that is the mayor and I and a few others had a meeting today with IDOT to talk about Pierce Boulevard. As you guys are well aware and the public is, GBT is Meyer is proposing a different use that will have to go back through plan use for that Shops at Pierce. And so you guys will be seeing that starting in Planning Commission. I did mention last week, the first time Meyer and the Supercenter and Pierce went through, we extended the radius for the certified letters, and we're doing the same again this time. However, the amendment to the PUD is just for the Shops at Pierce, not for the actual Meyer Center. So Jeff can get you an update, but it's going to end with, it all depends on what happens next. But we are continuing to work on that.
PUD stands for?
Plan
what?
Use Development. I'm sorry, I've been told by the mayor I speak in acronyms a little too often. So those are the projects that go to Planning Commission and then committees and councils. Any other questions for the Public Works section? Okay, I hope I did all right, Jeff. Thank you. So that wraps up the CIP for the next 5 fiscal years. So as I mentioned and Sandy both mentioned, just because something's in the CIP doesn't mean it's funded, doesn't mean it's going to get in there. We take this, we will put it on a future council meeting as a resolution adopting it. We roll it into our budget season. We look at kind of year one and we try our best to make sure all those are funded the best we can. But sometimes there's simply not enough money for the projects as you see it. Any other questions about the CIP? Okay.
Good job.
All right. 3.3. I heard from a few council members, and for the ones that have not been on the council until this year, or maybe you're not, don't have the background on the Bill O'Fallon Trust Fund. I did ask Sandy Evans, our finance director, to provide kind of the background of the Bill O'Fallon Trust Fund, how we got here, what has been funded thus far. As you guys who have been on the council know, when it gets kind of closer to the budget season, there are some projects that are unfunded, and we ask you guys what's your decision on what we should move forward with. That is not this time. We're not providing you with projects this time. This is simply a history lesson and kind of giving you an idea of where do we go from here. So with that, Sandy, I will turn it over to you. I do have your presentation, so you're going to have to tell me when to
Perfect.
fast forward.
Thank you. So, yes, as Grant alluded to, this is strictly an oversight of the Bill O'Fallon Trust Fund, how it became to be, and where we're going with it. So really, why was it started? Well, it started way back in 2021. We were looking at property tax relief. And so the conversation began with how can we alleviate some of the property tax, especially for parks? Because part of our problem is there was no stable funding for parks. And so the council, in their wisdom, they agreed, let's look at something. And so we wanted something that was going to be equitable for everyone. Property tax is not equitable for all residents. Therefore, we looked at a half-cent sales tax, or we looked at a sales tax, an additional sales tax. And then we started talking about, where are we going with our projects? We have so many projects that we want completed, but we don't have the necessary funding for. And so it was talked about and it was decided if we did a half-cent sales tax, this would alleviate both problems. We would be having a stable funding source for our Parks Department, and would eliminate that part of the property tax levy to eliminate that to reduce our property tax. And it also would allow us to build a fund where we could continue to grow that fund and then have it for projects that the council wants completed, but we don't have the necessary funding for. So again, we called it the Bill O'Fallon Trust Fund to treat it kind of as a trust so that we could start it. So that happened in 2021. We approved it. It became effective in July of 2022. We currently, that fund generates approximately $3.2 million in this fiscal year, so about 1.6 in the Bill O'Fallon. So the question is, how did it start? We talked about the sales tax, the quarter-cent sales tax is how it's continued to be funded, but we had a seed of about $4 million that came from the general fund reserve. And to clarify, the $4 million that funded it was general fund money, right? So it was not ARPA. There's been a lot of discussion. It did come, right? So ARPA came, ARPA went into the general fund. However, that money that was from ARPA was due to their standard allowance for revenue replacement for government services. So even though it went into the general fund and we had the reserves, back when we started it, the general fund already had about a $10 million excess cash on hand. So it wasn't like we were waiting for this $4 million to come in. So we did use that $4 million from the general fund to start it. And then continually, this quarter-cent sales tax is deposited into this fund. After some discussion, it's been decided, in order for this fund to work, we needed to build it. We can't just keep spending the money that comes about. So we maintain the original 4.4 as a principal to allow it to grow. And then out of that annual sales tax, we put 33% of that into this fund, to help fund for larger projects. The projects that are submitted for consideration should be for unfunded capital projects over $100,000. That has always kind of been like the background of, well, what's being funded, what projects do we consider? Most of our projects that we have funding sources, right? Some of them do not. And you can tell on that CIP, if you look, you can see the projects that say funded or not funded. So if you look at the projects which have been funded to date, we started this in FY23. One of our first ones we looked at, in 23, 24, we have the community park enhancement. So this did the design study for community park, the pool and park, that design study, the All Abilities Playground, the pickleball courts, the shade structures, parking lot at the sports park. We did the slide. This fiscal year, this current one, council chose the alert system for the fire stations, and again, some parking at the parks. So in looking at this, a lot of people are saying, well, why are there so many lot of park projects, right? Why are we only doing park projects? And part of it is their capital projects are expensive, and they really don't have a dedicated funding source. The money that's coming in for parks from now this quarter cent sales is mostly for operations and annual maintenance. It's not, we don't get enough in order to maintain or to do capital projects. Hotel motel tax is used heavily for economic development and sports tourism, but we also protect this fund in order to allocate for future turf field replacement. And that again is something we'll talk about. Many of the public works projects that are on the CIP, they already have a dedicated funding source. We have Prop S, we have MFT, so those projects already have the funding available or already in the plan. And the other issue with the public works infrastructure projects is that they take multiple years to get through. You have to do engineering, the design, construction, so that does require multiple years of funding. And the question is, how are they selected? So as we just presented the CIP, our department heads put these out for 5 years, and some are listed as not funded. As we talked about, they're submitted to council for consideration. Basically, we look at any unfunded capital projects over 100,000. One of the things that we talk about is all accumulated Bill O'Fallon trust funds do not need to be expended in the fiscal year, but they can be rolled over. So, for instance, this year, we had about $1.2 million available. That we didn't allocate the full $1.2 million, so that'll carry over. And so that's with a lot of these projects. If we see projects that we want to do in the future, just because that money's there this year doesn't mean it has to be used. We can use the reserve, that 33%, that should also warrant additional funding. We're hoping the estimated reserve balance for FY26, after we do the 3 projects that were just approved for FY26, we should have about $1.48 million in that amount to carry forward. And again, this was something the council set up. That $4 million is there. If a big project comes and you want to utilize it, that funding is available as well. And if a project comes up that's not budgeted or not in the CIP, this is again where the council can instruct staff to utilize that Bill O'Fallon Trust Fund. You can see here is projected growth of the Bill O'Fallon Trust Fund. Projected the first side of it is if we did not spend the annual quarter-cent sales tax, you can see how it can grow to over $8 million. If you do spend the 67% on an annual basis, you can see where the growth is much smaller. Therefore, should a large project come forward, you wouldn't have enough funds to cover it. So again, it's just kind of showing how it does accumulate. This does not take into account that 4 million. So that 4 million would be on top of those numbers that you see listed. You know, what large projects do we have coming up that may or may not be even listed on the CIP? You know, the Veneta Bridge replacement, that could be $10 million. The field house that Andrew talked about, that's kind of low, 10 to 20, could be more, could be less. We're having the downtown streetscape coming up. That's going to be $5 to $10 million. We could do smaller projects each year, or we could save it up for larger projects. So basically what's next, you know, if there's projects that the council sees or wants to be done, this is where your input is required and needed to give staff some direction on what do you want to do with the Bill O'Fallon Trust Fund. You can keep the money. We can keep spending it as we do. You can build the funds up for larger projects. So it's really, you know, this fund was set up for council recommendations. It is driven by the department heads because we see where we want to go, but it's also open to council. So if there are projects that you see that you may want, these are the funds that are available.
And so like Sandy said, it's mainly to fund large capital expenditures in excess of $100,000 that don't have a funding source. From this presentation, we're not pushing the council one way or another to not spend it or to spend it. This is simply kind of we're igniting the discussion on the Bill O'Fallon Trust Fund, getting it ready for you guys. You'll see projects provided by staff. We ask that if you guys have ideas or want us to look at something, you reach out to me or Sandy, and so we can discuss it with staff and then talk to you guys again about the Bill O'Fallon Trust Fund. But as mentioned, we do have a large amount of projects that are very expensive. And so if the council feels like they want to save up for a bigger project and not spend every year, that's also an option. With that, any questions?
Grant, when would y'all need to know this, the project? It has been brought to me as the finance chair that people want to have more of an opinion on this than just giving ideas. When do they need to get those ideas to you?
Well, they need to get the ideas to you as the council member.
Bring it to me.
And so.
Not to Grant.
Yep. So we would ask that as the council members, you're the voice of your ward. They bring them to you, and then you discuss them with us. I think you guys have a better feel of what kind of goes into the Bill O'Fallon Trust Fund and what doesn't. Appreciate that.
Grant, I'm assuming this money is, until it's used, is invested somewhere,
Yes.
making interest?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
That was my question.
And that the interest is put into the account. So that growth, I didn't take into consideration the 50 to 60,000 a year or more that we may get. So, but yes, it is invested. The 4 million is separated completely.
Can you remind me, is the $100,000 threshold, is that by ordinance? Like when we created
That was
this?
strictly in a
No.
conversation through committee and
Okay.
council.
So that's like our guiding principle, but like
That
if
is our guiding,
something
it is not
smaller
in
came
writing.
back,
If things are traditionally smaller than that, we probably don't have to allocate through the Bill O'Fallon Trust
Gotcha.
Fund.
Right.
Gotcha.
This is something to get the council thinking about larger projects
Gotcha.
that are mainly unfunded.
gotcha.
Okay, so logistically speaking here, what if the council as a whole would prefer, instead of allocating projects for the next fiscal year, we would collectively prefer to start setting aside money for one of these bigger projects? How does that happen? Because I'm not quite hearing when we're going to have this collective ability to have a conversation of what we want it to look like moving forward. Does that make sense?
Sure. And so this is the call to action for you guys to kind of start having those discussions, because we will bring it up during the budget season. And so we'll provide you with a list of proposed items and projects. And if the council's majority wishes to not expense any of that for that fiscal year, then that's the will of the council, and that's what staff will follow.
Right, so for instance, this last budget year, we had more projects than we had money. So the option was not do all the projects or get into that extra money we have. The council decided, let's not spend all of it, let's do this. So that's how we had about $125,000 that will be carried over to next year, but that's not being spent.
And so if your question is, when will you have time to discuss it as a whole, that'll be in the future committee meeting when we propose this.
But isn't that when you're already giving us projects to consider? It's not setting sort of what maybe we want now. It's like you're coming to us already with projects you want us to use it on, rather than us saying collectively, yes, we want projects, or no, we want to save it for, I'm just, shooting from the hip here. I don't know what everybody wants, but
Yeah.
when does when is there a space to have that conversation?
Yeah, and that will be in a future committee meeting, and I understand your,
Which committee are you?
probably the finance committee.
Okay.
And so I understand you're kind of concerned that, well, if you're already throwing projects on us to fund, then a discussion will be harder about saving.
Right.
But, as 14 members of the council, some may want to fund the project, some may not, and that's the beauty of democracy, the majority speaks.
Okay, so I think I understand now. I was just making sure that there was some opportunity before you start giving us options, that if we wanted to, we can say, no, we don't want to do that, or yes, we do want you giving us options.
And
Okay.
so in those kind of discussions, we try to facilitate for you guys to have an in-depth discussion. For the general public, Open Meetings Act dictate a lot what we can do and say, and so you guys cannot meet as a body and discuss city operations outside of a public meeting with a quorum. And so any type of discussions like that would have to happen in a public committee or council meeting.
In the past, you've always brought these projects to us, and it was the council's decision on which ones we wanted to pick, and if we wanted to pick any at all. So, or if we had a project we would like to champion, then we could do that also.
Correct.
So there's plenty of opportunity there.
That is correct. Thank you.
I just want to offer a praise and a thank you to Sandy, but also the department heads. The order in which we addressed all of these tonight is so helpful, and the timing of it. I feel like historically we've kind of piecemealed things together as we get into the budget session. So having this having this good context and history and things to think about before we get into the budget process, I'm thankful. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the compliment, but just wait, there's one more item to discuss tonight. So any other questions about where we're at and the history of the Bill O'Fallon Trust Fund? Again, this will be brought up multiple times over the next few months. Okay, so the last item to talk about tonight, and we apologize it's not on the agenda because it came to us on Friday. And so as we discussed in the CIP, we had planned in the next fiscal year to install turf fields at fields 9 and 10. Those are soccer fields on the northeast corner of the Family Sports Park. And to replace the championship field, which is field number 2, Andrew, is that right? So 14 years, as we talked about, it's had a great life. We are doing a lot of maintenance on it, patching. There are some areas that simply cannot be repaired anymore. And so Andrew is reaching out to Burton Jones, who's our contractor we've used previously, just to get a kind of budgetary quote. And what they gave him back was, well, if we can stay busy over the winter time and when schools aren't out of session and they want their work, then we can provide considerable cost savings. And so we looked at that on Friday between Andrew and Sandy and I. And so just as kind of a preface is the money we have saved up and we plan to spend next fiscal year is already available. And we believe we can get a considerable savings by pushing this project forward. But of course, that takes a council decision to authorize that. Saying that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to kind of discuss what the project is and if you guys have questions.
Thank you, Grant. As Grant said, once we applied for the Metro East Parks and Recreation grant to do these fields, we did receive that grant. It was not nearly enough to do the entire project, but it got the conversation started that it looks like we might be able to do this. So as Grant said, I reached out to Burton Jones, starting to have conversations of what would it look like and timing. I've always heard based on doing this for a number of years now, that if you do it in the off-season, there'd be considerable savings. And then also, because we're doing the parking lot out there in February, March, we have contractors on site who are capable of doing a lot of the work. They're already staged. So my conversation with Burnett Jones was, would we have even more savings because we've already staged contractors capable of doing the earthwork on site? And he said yes. So Burnett Jones did put this project, this proposal together for us. We'll go in depth of it, assuming that I'm getting some interest that we move forward with it tonight. In November, at my Parks and Environment meeting, we'll talk extensively about it. I'll give you a lot more of the detailed information, but you know, we did get 3 quotes from 3 of the turf manufacturers, so we already have that information. Right now, you know, pending some move forward acknowledgement from the council tonight, we'll reach out to those turf manufacturers again. We'll start to line up some different contracts with civil engineer to make sure that our numbers that we have right now are going to be accurate. But it is a savings, and more importantly, if we can tell our tournament directors right now or in the spring, and we can tell our renters right now that, hey, in the fall we're going to have 2 fields, I think that's going to help us with selling those fields, future fields, and booking those future tournaments now. Because if we wait to do it in the summer and we don't start till May, the fields will not be ready by the time we need them in August. So that's one of the biggest factors is if you start to build these fields in the summer, you'll get behind the schools, and the schools are always going to take priority in the summer. So that considerable savings is already recognized in some of the budget numbers that or some of the quotes we've already got. But yeah, so those contracts, again, we wouldn't have to look at our tournament directors and our renters in the face and say, the fields aren't going to be done for another month, 2 months. They've already told their players that we're going to be in O'Fallon. They've done their fees based on that, so it's not great if we can't get the fields done in time. So another reason why we'd like to push the fields forward more, closer to when we do the parking lot in late winter, early spring. So with that, I'll entertain any questions or concerns. Maybe any kind of feedback for me to move forward or not move forward would be great.
I was just going to say, Andrew, you referenced starting the project in May. Is that basically because it would be our new budget year starts May of next year? So that would be the connection of why we'd have to wait that long if we don't do it now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I just want to, one of the questions I know, and Grant brought it up, is, you know, the funding, where would the money come from? So when we ended our FY25, we had approximately $2.1 million already in reserve for this project. So Grant Economic Development budget, we always put reserve money away for this. By the end of FY26, we'll have about 3.6 million available, and that does not take into account, since this is funded through hotel motel, the new hotel and things that'll come in. So as far as funding for this, we will have funds available for this project, in case that was a concern of anybody like it was for me. So we're good.
And it's going to be around the 2.8, 2.9 million to get the 3 fields done. But those are the numbers I'm going to vet. So as Sandy said, we have money, plenty of money to do this project.
Yeah, and so in the hotel motel fund, which is 100% paid by hotel motel tax, over the last number of years, we've built up cash on hand and capital reserves for future field replacement and turf at fields 9 and 10. Upon receiving, you know, the great deal, we made the decision, and Mayor Van Hook and I spoke, and we wanted to turn it over to the council to ask if you had interest by kind of an unofficial head nod, or unless there's great concern from the council, we would have Andrew bring these contracts back and polish them up and get them ready for you about the November timeframe. So with that being said, if there's any questions or concerns, we're happy to address them or answer them today.
I just have one question. Andrew, what type of savings are we looking at, like 10%, 5%?
It's hard to say, but I can tell you right now, we're already at a $250,000 savings just on buying the additional piece of turf for the field 2. So, to whatever percentage that is, you know, At minimum, we're at 250 right now in savings.
And the other thing Andrew will provide, one of the things I asked too, was if he can get those additional tournaments, because we say we're getting it done, that will add, that extra economic interest as well.
Yeah, there will be additional revenue created by turf rentals.
Sandy, will you go over the funding again? Will you explain that one more time? You said you had
Yes.
money in reserve?
Right, so Grant Economic Development Fund 51, which is hotel motel tax, which is used for economic development such as a sports park, he's been putting away reserves every year since we've talked about, using the hotel motel. So we currently, at the end of this last fiscal year, we had $2.1 million already set aside for fields. So this year, we have about 1.5 million that we want to transfer for reserves. And that's everything coming in on our budget. And so we would have about $3.6 million available for turf reserves or for turf replacement.
So it's not taking money from somewhere else?
No.
So this is very similar, for the public, again, we try to make it not speaking in acronyms. So, if we wanted to buy a car in 5 years, we're saving up each year. We just called the dealership and they gave us 10 to 15, 20% off the car if we buy it 6 months early. And so that's what we're asking. Is the council okay with Andrew moving forward with this project and bringing it back to you, of course, in November? There are no votes. There's nothing on the agenda. It's simply a discussion item.
This sounds to me like a sound decision, readying us for next summer and filling up that new hotel on a routine basis. I think that all plays together.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I think we've got enough.
Thank you.
And just as an extra point, we do have 2 hotels under construction right now. They're moving along nicely, Spring Hill Suites and Home 2. So if you guys haven't gone out and looked at them, they're starting to go vertical.
Okay, that's all we have on the agenda tonight. We do have one more opportunity for public comments, so if anybody would like to come forward for public comments, please do so now. I'm not going to reread the disclaimer, but just know it still applies.
Ron Zelms, Ward 6. I told my wife it could be here 2 hours, so I don't want to waste my kitchen pass here. I read through the SIP today, and I really appreciate all the verbiage that goes with everything. Could you pull up the SIP again, the overall page that you had? The question I had, in the overview, it showed Public Works at 87 million, but if you scroll down to where the projects are, I think it totals up to 83 million. So I'm just trying to figure out if something got left out.
There's a page 2, Ron.
There's a page 2?
Public Works.
I must have missed it then.
Yeah, page 2. Right there at the bottom.
Thanks.
We'll add, though, when Public Works adds items, they put the cost of what our share would be, not always the total project cost.
Got it. Some of this kind of blends together with what Sandy said. Veneta Drive overpass. I was surprised I didn't see that in the SIP, or is that something that you think is beyond 5 years out? I don't know. The other thing was the field house, and I think Sandy kind of mentioned she had 10 or 20 million. The SIP says 30 million. I know that's a placeholder. I know that, but it seemed like a big disconnect there. And it was brought up about the Pierce traffic calming, and I appreciate that. And the only comment I would have is Meyer going to pony up any money? The reason we're spending that money is because of Meyer. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. So the question about the Veneta Bridge, yes, that might extend past 5 years. We currently have engineers looking at it, see what our options can be and what they cannot be. So I would expect major bridge replacement. Not only would it be grant dependent or very expensive, but it might be a number of years. The field house, you're right, it's a placeholder, shot in the dark. Pierce traffic, so we're still working on those traffic studies and the designs. I mentioned that, we have this planning commission coming up. A lot of it's dependent on how that moves forward. And then Meyer, so they'll be required to do all the roadway improvements in and around the site. Now, extending down Pierce, that will be on the city of O'Fallon.
Okay, we have public comments.
Jerry Albrecht, Ward, whatever I am, too. I agree with what Jessica said about generally what you do in community development is, making sure that all the ordinance and all the development rules are, but you need to consider the economic impact of what you're doing. Because as you're running out of developable commercial land, then it's going to become more and more important that the ability of whatever the development is to generate sales tax is the thing that's going to keep the property tax under control. If you don't do that, then in other words, you're trading some place like, I don't know what Sam's generates now, but it's a bunch of money. How many McDonald's does it take to make that up? So the important thing is that you consider that, because that's not something that's going to generate, sidewalks in your ward, but the money to pay for the sidewalks in your ward comes out of the taxpayers, because that's the only thing you got. And the stuff you do in the park is great, because that's the only money-making enterprise you have that can generate money that can be used for things other than water and sewer. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Does anybody else have any comments tonight? I think you had a few minutes left.
There was something else I knew I was going to mention. Sandy brought it up about the Build O'Fallon Trust Fund, the $4 million principal. I think one of the things that you ought to look at as well is floating that principal up every year. And what I mean by that is, in 10 years from now, that's not going to be worth $4 million of purchasing power that it is right now. That you may want to increase that principal amount by some inflationary formula, I don't know what, that says, you know what, if we're never going to tap that principal amount, then next year it really needs to go to 4.2 million and then to 4.4, so that 10 years from now, you still got the same purchasing power that you have now with that $4 million. Otherwise, the future value of money, 10 years from now, $4 million ain't $4 million. So just something to consider, that maybe you want to keep that principal amount floating up if it's truly something you're never going to touch. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I just
Sure,
add?
absolutely.
Ron, part of that is that additional 33% that we put away. So I agree to your point, and that's kind of why we looked at it. We didn't want just $4 million to sit there, so we're adding that 33% each time. So it really allows 67% for availability to the council.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. Okay, if we have no other public comments tonight, can I get a motion for adjournment?
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.